And this Sunday I'm taking it from a book called The Exquisite Risk by Mark Nepo. It's a poem he has at the beginning of one of his chapters. Death pushed me to the edge, nowhere to back off. And to the shame of my fears, I danced with abandon in his face. I never danced as free. And death backed off. The way dark backs off a sudden burst of flame. Now there's nothing left but to keep dancing. It's the way I would have chosen had I been born 3 times as brave.
Our scripture reading this morning is from John chapter 10, verse 10. I came that you might have life and have it to the full.
Some of us tease that Sacred Journeys is Unitarian with a little Jesus, so that was your little Jesus. Would you pray with me? As we gather to ponder the challenges of life, may our spirits be renewed. May they be touched by wisdom, grace, and insight. Amen. So, almost since I started ministry, I've had what I call a creative worship group. They're a group of, over the years, it's been 4 or 5 people who sit down with me on every 4 to 6 weeks, and we brainstorm the topics that I'm going to be preaching on for the next 3-4 weeks. So I sat with this group on Monday, and the way I always start these is everybody gets colored markers, and I put a blank piece of paper in the middle of the table with the date and the title of the sermon, or at least the theme or whatever. And so this Monday we sat down, I put a piece of paper in the middle of the table, it said October 1st, and it said, courage to live well. And one woman who's been in this group with me for like 20 years now, she took her finger and she pointed at that piece of paper and she said, why is this not the motto for Christianity? This should be the motto for Christianity. And then she went off on us for 10 minutes about how too much of Christianity has been focused on suffering and sacrifice. And she talked about her mother and her friends, and she's like, why is it everybody thinks that it's all about being a martyr and about how much you suffer and about how much you do? And she's like, why can't we celebrate life and living and joy and success? I mean, really, she went, I can't do it as well as she did. She went on and on and on. And I think a lot of it was her mother, who tends to be like a very negative, complaining kind of person. But she's talking about all these friends, and so the other 4 of us are kind of looking at each other like, wow, wonder who she knows, right? Because she's not talking about the 4 of us there, and yet she has a point. Too much of Christianity has been focused on the suffering and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, right? All you have to do is walk into any Catholic church, and what do you see up front? A crucifix, right? They've left Jesus hanging there for 2,000 years. Don't you think it's about time we could take it down? But they want people to remember. It's like their emphasis to say Jesus suffered and died for you, right? That is the most abusive theology I can think of. There's a book called Proverbs of Ashes. And in that book, the authors talk about a woman who was being physically and emotionally abused by her husband. And the woman went to her priest for advice, what to do. And her priest said, you should take joy in your sufferings because it brings you closer to Jesus. He said, Jesus loved you and therefore he suffered for you. And so if you love Jesus, you too should suffer gladly and bear your beatings gladly. And she didn't question this theology until about 20 years later when her husband started turning on the kids. But you see how that kind of theology is so abusive in and of itself, spiritually abusive. And yet it's sort of the tip of the iceberg with like conservative, fundamentalist Christianity. I remember all those, there were people, maybe they still do this in places, but there were all those years where you couldn't drink, you couldn't dance, you couldn't play cards, you couldn't go to movies, because they might lead to something immoral, right? And heaven forbid we not allow the beautiful, wonderful intimacy of making love and turn it into something sinful and dirty. There have been too many ways over the years that religion has been used in painful, abusive ways. And that's top of my list, is telling people that it's good to suffer, because then you're suffering in solidarity with Jesus. Jesus wouldn't have ever wanted anybody to do that. He didn't want people to suffer. Certainly not to suffer for him, because it was somehow going to help him to be in solidarity with him. Jesus came to alleviate suffering, to help liberate people from oppression and from old mindsets. As the one line that Scott read to you said, Jesus was all about bringing life and bringing it to the full, bringing it abundantly. But even people back then didn't like that. He was criticized for, having some fun with his friends. Eating and drinking, they called him a glutton and a drunkard. What if he just wanted a couple nights of fun with his friends? Why is that so wrong? So what does it mean? For those of you who aren't used to me, I ask questions all the time, and I actually expect answers. What does it mean to live well? To live abundantly? To live fully? To be a risk taker. And I'm not talking, well, maybe it's jumping out of a plane, if that's really what you want to do. But to be a risk taker. What else? To be open-minded. Marianne?
To accept the beauty in others and not only yourself.
To accept the beauty in others. And you said not only in yourself? I would say to accept the beauty in yourself. Because I think a lot of people don't, which is why they don't accept beauty in other people. Missy?
To live in the moment and not let it pass you by.
To live in the moment and not let it pass you by. To be an optimist. Ron?
Don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. That's like one of my next sermons. We're going to talk about the courage to be vulnerable. So if you and I need to talk about that, you let me know. Anything else? To live well. To be true to yourself. Sue?
Laugh a lot.
To laugh a lot. To allow that humor. You know, this is like one of my confessions. The hardest people for me are people who won't laugh. I just don't know what to do with them. So, to have integrity. To be respectful and kind. All of those wonderful things. And they all sound like, well, that's easy. We should just be able to do all of that. Why does it become so hard? Yeah, you get mired down. Okay, hold that thought. So, I I chose the Mark Nepo poem because it spoke to me of someone who finally figured out how to quote unquote dance, right? So Mark Nepo is this amazing spiritual writer, but in his 30s, he almost died from cancer. And so he writes from that perspective. So when he says death pushed me to the edge, he really meant death pushed him to the edge. And it was on that edge of facing his death that he finally let loose and let himself dance fully and with abandon, which I completely understand because before Julie, I was married to someone who would never be the first person on a dance floor. Oh gosh, no. I'd be like, let's go. No. It's the metaphor for life and for risk-taking. To be that person out on the dance floor, to not worry about what other people have to say about your dancing. I don't care if you got rhythm or not. Just enjoy life, right? And he says, so he did that. Finally, faced with death, he could not worry about anything else anymore, and he could live his life to the fullest. And then death backed off. What do you do when you get a taste of living life like that, and then all of a sudden the reason for doing that is gone? And he said all that was left was to keep dancing. And he says if only he had been born 3 times as brave, he could have kept doing it. Only he could have been born 3 times as brave, he could do that. Why? Why does it take courage to live life well, to live life fully? What is it that we're afraid of? To go back to my conversation with the kids. What are those things that scare us that we need to have courage about in order to actually live well? And you named one. So it's something that, things that just distract us, right? I don't know if maybe we need courage to not be distracted. To push it away. Do you know the dust is going to be there tomorrow? And the next day. And the next day. I saw a meme that said something like, you know, I dusted and then it all came back. And I'm not falling for that again. That was perfect. What are we afraid of? That we won't take the risks? That what do we need courage for to live well?
For change.
For change, right. We don't like change. We get in this comfortable little spot in the road, we're driving down a street. What if that comfortable path is a rut? Okay, what else?
Fear of not acceptance.
Fear of not acceptance. Maybe somebody's not, you're going to dance funny and people are going to go, oh, she's kind of weird.
Fear of just failing.
Fear of failing. What else?
Losing security.
Losing security. It's safe in that rut.
Fear that you're not going to live up to the expectations of others.
Absolutely. Fear of not living up to others' expectations. Maybe even your own expectations sometimes. What else? Sometimes I think we're just afraid to be happy. Sometimes it's hard to go on after loss. There's this feeling that, no, I shouldn't be happy, right? Or if I'm happy, then the other shoe is going to fall, right? How many of us are just waiting for the other shoe? And so we hold back on that joy. There's so many things that if we could just have an ounce of courage, we could dance that dance anyway. So I read an article in The Guardian, written by some hospice nurses. And they listed the top 5 regrets of people who were dying. Number 5, people regretted that they hadn't allowed themselves to be happier. They said they didn't realize until they got to the end that, you know, it could be a choice to be happy, to choose how you're going to look at life. To maybe not get stuck in those old patterns and in those old habits. Not pretend to others that you're happy when you're not. They regretted not having laughed as much as they wanted and allowed themselves to be silly. The number 4 thing is they wish they'd stayed in touch with friends. How easy is it to get distracted and get busy and not take the time to connect? And yet that's one way to live fully, right? To maintain those relationships, those friendships. The next one, number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Ron, your vulnerability, we're going there in a week or 2. I can't remember which week we're doing it. Number 2 is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Ain't that the truth, right? Wish I hadn't dusted so much. And the last one is I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Not the life others expected of me. How do we live true to what's in our hearts? How do we make decisions based on what's right and what's good and what's just? How do we disappoint others that we might love sometimes to make decisions for our highest good or the community's highest good? And it was again a point of you coming to the end of life and saying, I shouldn't have worried so much about what they wanted me to do because now I lost what was important to me. And so many people didn't even realize half of their own dreams. So I want to end with a quote by Walt Whitman. His poetry collection entitled Leaves of Grass is something that he revised over and over and over again, but this is in the preface to the very first edition in the early 1900s. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons and with the young and with the mothers of families. Re-examine all you've been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your soul. And your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body. That, to me, is his statement of how to live well. So, I have homework for you. I don't always do that, but lucky all you Olympia Brown folks, you get homework too. My homework is, I want you to pick one thing this week that will help you to live life well, to live it more fully, to live it abundantly. And that does not mean that you go shopping for your 90th pair of shoes. This is about all of those things we talk about, whether it's reconnecting with a friend, whether it's dancing in the moonlight or watching a sunset and not being distracted by all of those little things that at the end of the day aren't going to matter. Whether it's spending time with your dog out in nature and feeling the energy and seeing the beauty, whether it's meditating and spending some time for your spiritual self in whatever way that looks. Maybe it's cuddling up with a kid and reading a book. Whatever it is, figure it out. You're all smart people. You can all do it. You got a question?
Yeah, we have to turn it on.
You have to turn it in. If you would like to turn it in, I will take emails and you can tell me what you did. I don't like grading though, let me just say that. So, but yeah, Do that. Amen.